This is one of the most important astrology transits of 2023. We are looking at a climactic and action-oriented major paradigm shift coming on. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome back. Yes, annular solar eclipse happening in the sign of Libra on October 14th, 2023, followed by an October 28th lunar eclipse and initiating a greater sort of climax paradigm from this eclipse until the 2024 solar eclipse. Are you all excited for eclipse season of 2023 and 2024? Comment below and let me know your thoughts on eclipses now in the 2023 paradigm. What an interesting period of time to be concentrating so much potent energy. 2023 as a year has kind of been a more reserved and resource-oriented year where many people have kind of been pulling back and taking stock of where their lives are and how they want to change things. So it's kind of, as a year, antithetical to the energy of eclipses. So I feel that having this really powerful and almost overwhelming eclipse on October 14th demonstrates that we're starting to move a little bit away from that stock-taking energy and starting to move more into an active and movement-oriented energy. As I feel this final quarter of the calendar year of 2023 to be much more of a build-up and much more of a methodical, active preparation for the way that we're really leveling up in the 2024 year cycle. So before we get too far into the video, everyone, be sure to hit the subscribe button below and turn on the bell notifications to get notified when the lunar eclipse video comes out later this month, as well as future eclipse installments and other astrology content. Also, I want to invite you guys over to my Patreon page. This month, I have filmed 12 readings for all signs, as well as weekly forecasts, which you get every week over on Patreon. We were talking about some really incredible topics, preparing for this final quarter. Even though the readings were about October, I got to really speak for each of the signs about some of the expectations and potentials for the rest of this year. And then each week I'm coming on and reflecting on some of the more immediate and present-oriented aspects. If you haven't tried out a membership to the Patreon page, do try it out now. It is very convenient, easy, secure, and it makes this channel possible. I'm going to link that below and in the pinned comment. We're really preparing for some huge changes in 2024, so at least subscribe to the channel, but try to check out a membership because that really rounds out the content. Anyway, everyone, let's dive into this October 14th eclipse. I'm so excited to be talking about this because at long last, we really do have a perceptible change happening. 2023, as I was saying a second ago, almost unlike any year that I've read for so far, it's really kind of like drawn out a certain energetic norm and kind of made it secure and long lasting. And nonetheless, as the chart is on the screen now, as you can see, we have one of the most potent eclipse configurations that I've ever seen as an astrologer. Yes, we have a yod to the eclipse formed by Neptune and Uranus. This is so rare. This is so unlikely to see, and it's even close in degrees. Okay, so it's the eclipse is happening at 21 degrees of Libra. We have Uranus at 22 degrees of Taurus, Neptune at 25 degrees of Pisces, forming a really powerful yod, which is also known as the finger of God in astrology, to the eclipse. What does that mean, y'all? To have a finger of God basically pointing at an eclipse. Well, this means total and absolute paradigm change. This means an absolute shift at every single level, from the deepest, most internal sense of personal identity, personal perception, to the most macro level, sort of like global connective level, even like universal level, in the way perhaps that the Earth, which of course is experiencing this eclipse, would be working in tandem with other moving astronomical bodies, other planets, other matter, and just consciousness within the universe. We're seeing that type of hierarchical shift here, which I think for some people is going to be very welcome And being that it's happening in the sign of Libra on the Libra-Aries axis, it has something to do with the initiative to take action. It has something to do with decision-making. It has something to do with impulses. And also what would I call it? The triggering or the sudden shift into a new beginning. Of course, the first 7th house axis, Aries Libra axis, is about new beginnings. It's about deciding to try something. It's about, on the Libra side, it's about the decision-making process when we're about to initiate. On the Aries side, it's about that impulse or that motivation that pushes and forges initiation. So there's a finger of God transit connected through Neptune and Uranus, pointing out the fact that many of us need to forge into a new type of initiation, that many of us need to start over in some way, that many of us are going to have to trust ourselves enough to actually, I can't even think of the right word, but it's like cosmically kind of integrate ourselves or cosmically initiate ourselves into what we're feeling. I think one of the crisis points for the last few years has been playing things safe, actually, for a lot of people. We've had like global unrest. We've had, you know, what happened in 2020. We've had a lot of things that have people kind of like, and I've read a lot about this in 2023. I've spoke a lot about in 2023 how people were kind of like almost as if like a river is like receding into the mountain to like pool and reserve its resources. Consciousness in a certain way since 2020 has been doing that, where it's been kind of like pulling back a little bit and like ascertaining the resource bank, kind of like pooling and kind of gestating on how to really express. Well, this eclipse, as would make sense, is going to kind of change that a little bit. And I'm going to predict a lot of people actually using some resources here, actually taking a direct kind of action, actually beginning to perhaps be resourceful or to actually use what they have. So there's an indication October 14th that we're going to have a paradigm shift that shows a lot more of a kind of, I'm not going to call it haphazard, but this is the Aries Libra axis. Some people are going to hit an edge, okay, around this time. Yeah, nervous breakdowns, definitely possible. The Aries Libra axis deals with also mental or perceptual health, and because that's like the way the brain works, right? When you're thinking of impulses, you're thinking of decision making, you're thinking of motivations and triggers and synapses. That's very much on the Aries Libra axis. So some people can also be too impulsive. What I would like to point out as well, we're going to talk about all the planets, but Pluto in Capricorn, okay, if you see on the chart, it's kind of like the most powerful transit in my opinion right now. But in this configuration, it's kind of hitting the T-square, but it's not like exact. And the way that I've drawn the lines, you can kind of get this idea that Pluto is kind of like almost puppeteering the situation, or it's not even puppeteering, it's just almost observing or witnessing a certain like conflict point, but it's not affected, okay? Even if we were to say that it's at the T-square point, it's observing these polarities, but it's not really beholden to the fallout of them. So that's a greater archetype or sort of hermeneutic coming in during this time, is this feeling of Pluto, or that Plutonian energy, that kind of like deep, powerful, kind of like out of sight, out of mind energy, knows what's going on here, has a connection to what's going on here, to these conflicts, but is not necessarily beholden to the fallout. So careful here with situations where you have everything at stake, but then there are like these outliers who are invested but don't necessarily have things at stake, as I find this to be very likely. This is kind of like proxy conflict. This is kind of like proxy dynamics and hierarchy that I feel coming to a head during this transit. But that does not necessarily mean finality or conclusions. It's just more like a fallout point or a major conflict point that can come up during this eclipse. And definitely like blame and liability, okay, with Libra, right, being the legalistic sign of the zodiac, ruling law, ruling judicial concepts and legal philosophy, okay, being that Uranus and Neptune here are pointing at it, there are going to be people who are like really pointing at these legal infrastructures, or people who are really like pointing at the need or the quest for finality regarding certain constructs at that level. I also feel that because this yod is formed by Neptune and Uranus, both of these planets, Neptune deals with fogginess. It deals with, it's the ruler of Pisces. It's the thinking of like the ocean, like being underwater. It's sort of a different reality. So we have this sort of like disconnect from reality, pointing out a kind of very coherent construct. So that's interesting. It's an interesting thing to think about. Careful about being in any way drunk or deluded and trying to initiate some type of decision-making process. That could be happening during this time. People who are not within clear comprehension, really pointing something out or really trying to get things rolling. Also with Uranus, that's different. Like the Uranus in Taurus also pointing out this eclipse point is going to have something to really reveal, Uranus being like the ruler of technology, innovation, the ruler also of certain like intellectual progress, or in a similar way to Jupiter, like a sort of higher-minded intellectualism combining with innovation and technology, science, all of those kinds of things. Also pointing this out. So we've got these two polarities. It's a very polarized period of time. And I will say that too, that there's a lack of compromise here. There's a lack of settlement and a greater polarization on both ends that is happening, not just because of this eclipse, but because of the general astrology of this time. That's the indication. Because like you have Neptune and Uranus, which are kind of like polar opposites. Uranus is like hyper clarity, hyper technical, hyper also not just innovating, but kind of in the same way that this Aries energy is motivating or trying to create new beginnings. It's trying to push the envelope of certain development, whereas Neptune is much more just like floating in the ether, and it's not urgent. Okay, there's like this thing of like, are we having urgency here, or are we pressing the pause button? Both urgency and pause are combining to point out this hyper eclipse in the decisive balance-oriented sign of Libra. So it's really the entire spectrum here. Again, my main thesis is a greater polarity along extremes due to lack of settlement, due to lack of compromise, meaning that it's going to be harder to compromise. It's going to be harder to come to certain settlements. It's going to be harder to come to certain middle-of-the-way decisions. This is like an all-or-nothing kind of sink-or-swim energy that is coalescing during this time. But the real power, okay, the real Pluto in Capricorn is not beholden to the fallout due to these this greater polarization along extremes. It's almost like just like witnessing, seeing something conflictual or hard happen, but not being impacted by it. That's like really the zone of safety during this time, is in that sort of like, I don't know, archetype of the witness. I don't know, that's very dramatic and theatrical sounding. But there's a question about the greater pivots and changes. We are moving up to like Pluto changing into Aquarius in 2024. And can that sort of zone of safety that Pluto represents, I feel, in this chart, be maintained? And can that baton be carried over and sustain beyond into these changing Pluto sign that we have in 2024? So that's kind of like, it's like a question of sustainability of witnesship, or a sustainability of zones of safety, a sustainability of sort of like out of sight, out of mind, slightly detached, but still within proximity, or still within connectivity to the greater energetic polarities. Okay, yeah, I think that that's probably the main point of this eclipse, is finding these balanced points where there's a zone of safety and a relevance to the greater global themes happening, but not necessarily a huge stake or a huge role within that tug of war happening. Because I would really call it a tug of war, right? If we see this Aries Libra opposition, and then the way that Neptune and Uranus are forming this yod to this eclipse. Saturn, Pluto, Venus, and Mars are kind of like totally out of it, though. So again, you've got this feeling of like hyper integration along certain lines, but then total detachment, or even irreverence, or lack of significance along other lines. So this is like also a really great, like bring this more down to the personal level, because we've talked so much in these sort of like high quantum philosophical notions. At the more personal level, this is a time of reorientation and recalibration, where certain things which used to be super relevant will not any longer be relevant. And we're going to like shift relevances basically. And we're going to see, okay, I had this certain like doctrine in my life, or this certain like philosophy, or even like a law in my own life, like Libra, right? The sign of law. Like I never allowed myself to do this, but I made myself do this. You can see a switching here, and you can see old sort of like self-regulations or old self-morals totally deconstruct, and a different kind of like lifestyle starting to integrate here. It's very transformative, and the Scorpio and Sagittarius seasons that we're about to go into are also really transformative. So I don't think that a lot of a lot of this stuff that we've come to since like 2020 about like where we put ourselves, where we don't put ourselves, what we spend on, what we don't spend on. I mean, do you guys see this? Like where certain things that you've always depended on are like meaningless at this point? Certain addictive cycles, certain comforts, certain dependencies, certain ideas or mindsets about what you do and don't do. I've really felt since like August 2023, there was a major change along these lines, and we have different people in the same bodies. Okay, I don't mean to freak you out. It's not like different people, but it's such a transformation happening to many individuals that, and that's powerful. Okay, that's powerful when you're you, and you have a transformation on the inside, but you're still you, right? And you've not like, you know, crossed over or anything, right? Like the personal death rebirth cycles are so strong with this late Pluto in Capricorn too, and the way that it's on that cusp, right? This would make sense generationally on the cusp. So keep that in mind also, especially if you're dealing with like long-running people in your life. People are changing here. And you may be dealing with somebody that you think that you know, but they may not be that person anymore. And I'm speaking kind of poetically, like they're still that person, but they may adhere to such different personal guidelines, to such different lifestyles, to such different ideas and concepts, that they might as well almost be a different person at this point. So careful with thinking you know somebody here. Also careful with anything edgy or anything dealing with people who struggle with mental illness, people who struggle with physical illness. Illness and disease would also be at an edge with this transit, because this Libra Aries eclipse is going to really force people to turn over a new page with like illness and disease, whether physical, mental, even budgetary, or moral or philosophical. We have been with that late Capricorn stellium that we had in 2020, right? And what happened in 2020? We were dealing with disease, Capricorn, dis-ease. Like when Capricorn's in the negative, it's the most difficult, trying, diseased type of energy. And then, of course, when it's in the positive, it's healthy leadership. It's powerful, material, responsible, dutiful, integrative, help, leadership, capacity, strength. And we're seeing that too. Like that's not totally absent during this time. But there's a feeling definitely with this eclipse of things being really tired and people really wanting that new leaf turnover, like wanting a new house, wanting a new, some people wanting like new partners, wanting new houses, wanting new locations, new contexts for themselves. And there is a major pointing out of lack of balance, right? Like, again, something's pointed out with this eclipse. It's a yod to an eclipse. So in an eclipse, what's an eclipse? It's something comes in, something goes out, or something is removed, something is taken away, something, a source of light is diminished. So there's a pointing at a diminishing. There's a pointing out of a diminishing with this transit, and that's the main archetypal significance of this transit, the pointing out of a diminishing and the revealing or the seeing of something being revoked or concealed. And you can apply that at a deeper level for yourself, or you can apply that to certain like higher issues. And then what's the point, right? What's the point of seeing a diminishing? The point of that would be to signal some type of personal realization about impermanence, okay? Reminding us that we need to do things while it's fresh, while the energy's there, because sometimes things diminish or go away, and then it's less possible. So a lot of us are learning lessons here about timing. A lot of us are learning lessons here about not sitting on gifts from God, okay? And like really actualizing into things while they're relevant, while they're fresh. And not just waiting for things to diminish. Not just waiting for things to wither. There's a different relationship with time and that's perhaps where Uranus and Neptune could find connection, is not really even just a relationship to time, but a relationship to relevance and the use or the perception of capacity and push, okay? Because there is both of those in Uranus and Neptune. Uranus on a more scientific, innovative level, and then Neptune on a more artistic or ethereal level. There's this like need to express. So expression is a center point of this eclipse, and definitely something relating to ego death or identity diminishing here, and then like the eventual growth of like new parts, new processes. A lot of people coming out of closets here, a lot of people having identity changes, a lot of people seeing themselves quite differently. And I want to prepare you guys for that. There's a diminishing of who we thought we once were that could come up during this time, and a replacement with like, okay, this is who I am now. And like a lot of us have to get real. And a lot of us might have been suffering from like imposing certain previous identity standards or ego constructs onto ourselves, and it just doesn't work. Okay, it's not like resonating with us, it's not resonating with other people, it's perhaps leading to like isolation or separation, which then cues up a reality like this. So that's like already happened, but like that's when you get into these like types of situations that cosmically, where you have such extreme levels of reintegration. So anyway, everyone, stay safe. Keep your mind. Also, like speaking just very briefly here, materially. Okay, materially, thinking about material changes. Okay, moving houses, buying things, upgrading, renovating, restoring. That's going to be on people's mind with this too. Like executing or authorizing some type of like restoration because of the depreciation of the late Pluto in Capricorn. It has to be so balanced, and you have to be very methodical and measured in any type of like grand decision making, with Libra being pointed out like this. The finger of God is pointing at this idea of like strict balance, strict regulation, methodical movements, and to an extent incrementalism. Careful about being too fast or rushing. We've really slowed the pace here when it comes to any type of grand or major decision making. So yeah, if you're having anything in your life where you're like, I can't stand where I live, I can't stand that things are in this kind of shape, or I'm like really disappointed with the physical material situation, which is a very common for a late Pluto in Capricorn. There's a feeling of decline or depreciation. If you don't have this, very lucky. don't make it resonate if it doesn't resonate. It will most likely be later into the next year before these things really, really are changed, but the ideas and plans can go into place here. And try to have as much like review, advice, and make sure that you're coming from a place of internal integration and you're not like trying to cope with authority or cope with a perceived change making that does not really actually change much. Okay, careful about that compensatory choice making, and try to continue the sort of long forged momentums. There's a reward for that with these transits. But anyway, everyone, I'm going to conclude. Check out the Patreon membership below if you want more information. I talked about all the 12 signs for October and September as well if you wanted to do some hindsight. It's such a great value. I will link it below and in the pinned comment. And I also do weekly forecasts over there. And it's just going to really round out some of these messages and give more firm rooting if you wanted to invest a little bit. Very, very reasonable into your spiritual or philosophical journey. Come check us out over on Patreon. It helps make this channel possible. Thank you all so much and have a safe, blessed eclipse. Much love, everyone. Bye.